It's time for CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, and TuneIn. The easiest thing to do is tell Alexa or Siri to play CBJ in 30. Here's your host, Bob McElligott.
It is NHL Trade Deadline Day, and for the past couple of weeks here on the Monday Mailbag edition of CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union, we've been talking about potential ways the Blue Jackets might go by the trade deadline. Might they try to add some offense? What are they going to do with certain players? And now, as we finally get to the day, the Blue Jackets have lost 7 in a row. They haven't gone pointless throughout all of that. You just look at the last example, Saturday night in Nashville, when the Blue Jackets came back from being down 2-0, went up 3-2, then gave up a goal that tied the game. Eventually it went to a shootout before Nashville got the second point. So the Blue Jackets have been able to scrounge up a point here and there through an overtime loss, a shootout loss, but they have lost 7 times in a row. They have not won a game since Seth Jones went out with his injury. As a matter of fact, in the game that Seth got injured, that's when this losing streak started for the Blue Jackets. Coincidence? I think not. Going to get to some of your questions today. Well, I'll try to get to all of your questions today and see what's on your mind and see, we'll just find out if the Blue Jackets do anything. If there's any move to be made, I think they're going to be very hard-pressed to make moves just because of the roster situation and where they are right now. However, there was good news yesterday. Jonas Korpisalo, let me try that again. Jonas Korpisalo was recalled from his conditioning assignment with the Cleveland Monsters. Korpisalo played on Saturday night in Rochester. The Monsters won that game in overtime, and for Korpisalo, it was his first game action that is, since being injured on December 29th in a game against the Chicago Blackhawks at Nationwide Arena. So he is back. He has been taken off the injured reserve list. He is ready to go. I don't know if we're going to see him tonight against the Ottawa Senators, maybe tomorrow on the road in Minnesota. Either way, it's a back-to-back situation. We're going to see Jonas Korpisalo for the first time in a long time, and that is welcome news. It's welcome news in just getting somebody back, getting a player coming the other way. For weeks on end, it's been guys getting injured and coming out of the lineup, and nobody coming back from injury to the lineup. We saw Cam Atkinson come back, and that was short-lived. He got re-injured. He's back out. Saw Oliver Bjorkstrand come back. He is now re-injured and back out. So it's good to see a guy coming back the other way, and hopefully Korpisalo doesn't follow that path, that he stays uninjured, and he continues to play throughout the rest of the regular season. I also think it's good for Jonas to get back right now because Elvis Merzlikins, once again, is looking to be human. He had been superhuman for weeks, and that is true of all of the Blue Jackets. But as the Blue Jackets' team defense has struggled since their structure has fluctuated a little bit, Elvis has gone the same way. No surprise. Those two things should go hand in hand. The way your team plays defensively with the structure to make it easier on your goaltenders, that should make your goaltenders look better and be better, quite frankly. And so it's not a surprise, but Elvis, he started on a low at the beginning of the year, got himself acclimated, was on really an all-time high, and now there's a dip in his game. And again, in my opinion, it's related to the entire structure around him. So to have Korpisalo coming back, a guy that would have played in the NHL All-Star game had he not gotten injured, to have him come back and be ready to go and to be able to take some of those minutes, to be able to give Elvis a break. Elvis has been playing a lot of hockey. Matisse Kivlenieks got in for a couple of games here and there, but for the most part, Elvis has played a lot. So this will give him a break. This will allow Korpisalo to get himself going once again, hopefully here, and then they can share time, battle it out. The team has said that Korpisalo is still the number one goalie, as well he should be. So that's good to have him coming back. I'm excited about him coming back. Again, it's a bit of positive news to grab onto for this team. So that roster transaction went down yesterday with Korpisalo coming back up. Matisse Kivlenieks gets reassigned to Cleveland. Calvin Turcoff, who came up and made his NHL debut in Nashville on Saturday night, also was returned to the Cleveland Monsters yesterday. The Ottawa Senators are in town tonight. Again, no rest for the weary, because even though it's trade deadline day and 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the deadline, And if you make a trade, you might have to take somebody out of your lineup. Oh, well, there is a game today. So keep all of that in mind. Game today, game tomorrow. So as I said, there's no time to sit back and rest on your laurels, as they say. You got to get right back to it. And I've got to get to your questions and find out what's on your mind. And I'll do that right after I tell you about the fine folks over at Tel Ohio Credit Union. At Tel Ohio Credit Union, well, first of all, it's a credit union. So you've got to join the credit union. And the first question you probably would have is, well, why should I do that? What are the benefits to joining a credit union? Well, go to their website at telohio.org. They have all of that information laid out for you. You can see what the benefits are right there. And you can see the different services that they provide and how those benefits tie in with those services. And maybe you're going to find something that appeals to you, something that is a better fit than you have right now. If you can't find what you're looking for on their website during business hours, you can click on the live chat option, and the box will pop up on your screen, and somebody will get with you and answer your questions. Or if you want to talk to a regular person face-to-face, you can do that just by stopping by any of their local offices. Tel Ohio Credit Union is open to everyone in central and southwestern Ohio, and they are federally insured by NCUA. Well, as you well know by now, I take questions in several ways. I started it right after the first of the year. For years, I just took your questions via Twitter, and you typed your questions, and I would read those questions back and answer them. And I still do that. Anytime you can tweet me at Bobby Mac Sports, and I'll take your question like that. But in the last couple of weeks, we've also added the option for you to actually ask your question by just getting on your phone, recording a voice memo with your name, where you're from, ask your question, and then you can actually be on the show. And that's how we're going to start it off with question number 1 today.
Hey, Bob. Mike the Fireman and
Aiden Montgomery
here in Westerville, Ohio. First-time voice memoer, long-time listener. We got a question for you. So with Josh Anderson being on the IR as long as he had, what is the determination on when he can come back? Is it the player, the medical staff, or the coaches? And Aiden has a question too.
Do you think Sonny Milano for Damon Severson would be a good trade?
I don't think it's a bad idea. Aiden doesn't think it's a bad idea.
No, I don't.
Anyway, we really appreciate what you're doing, and we wish your son all the best. It's been fun watching him play. Go Jackets.
Well, Mike and Aiden, I appreciate both of you checking in, and thanks for the kind comments, and thanks for the well wishes for my son. And before I get to your answers, I just got to say, yesterday was a pretty tough day for me because my son played in his last high school hockey game. They're in the OHSAA state playoffs at single elimination. They had to play against Olentangy Liberty yesterday. I had a pretty good idea what was going to happen in that game. One team is 20th seeded. The other one is the 3rd seed. Numbers don't lie at times. But if they would have lost on Saturday, then I wouldn't have got to see him play yesterday. And it was really special for me to be there on the last day. And it was tough. And it was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be because I've watched him battle in goal for many, many years. And I've watched him enjoy himself. I've watched him be frustrated. I've watched him become a young man in the way he carries himself in the game and outside of the game. And to know that part of his life is over it was tougher to deal with than I thought. I guess I was just ignoring it and pretending the end was never going to come. But the end did come yesterday, and it was a lopsided loss, and it was tough. But he handled it like a pro. And so, again, I appreciate the kind words in regards to him. Baseball practice begins today. Baseball season begins today. So I guess we'll just keep moving on. That's usually what we do. We just put our heads down and we keep moving on. But yesterday was a tough day personally, and in our family it was tough. We don't spend a lot of time feeling sad about things, but yesterday was a happy day, but it was a sad day too. Now let me get to your questions because that's what you're here for, is to get the answers to your questions. So, Josh Anderson, let's start with your question, Mike. Josh Anderson, when can he come back? The team trainers and the doctors evaluate him, and he's been skating, but he hasn't been taking any contact. There was a story in The Athletic a couple of weeks ago now, I think, that Aaron Portzline wrote where he talked to the agent for Josh Anderson, Darren Ferris, and he was saying that Josh is getting looked at by our doctors, and when our doctors say that he's ready, then he'll play. So there's a second opinion being searched for, I guess, in that situation. So it's kind of, so that makes it a little bit more complicated. And I don't know a lot about it. I know what I read. I haven't seen Josh. I haven't talked to Josh about this, but whenever he's healthy and ready to go and feels comfortable, that's when he goes. And John Tortorella won't, he always says, and he does mean this, he says he doesn't talk to the trainers. I'm sure that that's a little white lie when there's injuries. I'm sure that he at least has an inkling of what's going on. But when it comes to, he's not going to beg guys to play. When they're ready to play, they'll tell him, and he'll put them back in the lineup. So it's kind of in limbo with that. Now, how about the second part of the question? Sonny Milano for Damon Severson, a right-handed shot, young defenseman from New Jersey. I don't know. I hadn't thought about this until hearing the question. First of all, Sonny Milano has got to be a frustrated young man right now. He's got great offensive upside. We've talked about him a million times. He has worked on the defensive part of his game. It got better. It's gone the other direction now where he's, he was slipping right before he got taken out of the lineup. But he's got to be frustrated because look at this team and how banged up it is. And look at the guys like Calvin Turcoff are being called up and put right into the lineup ahead of him. Stefan Matteau gets called up and gets put into the lineup ahead of him. So I'm sure he's frustrated. And I'm not telling you this happened because I don't know that it did. And I'm human nature. If he wanted a change of scenery, I wouldn't blame him because of where he is in this situation right now. But then there are so many other things. I mean, he does have that offensive upside. Can you find a team that you feel you're going to get a fair return for Sonny Milano? Remember, this guy was a first-round draft pick still. You don't want to give him away for nothing. The Severson thing, you look at where the Blue Jackets are without Seth Jones, and if you could use another young defenseman, and I don't know what his money is, and I didn't look up what his salary is. The Blue Jackets have more money than they can shake a stick at when it comes to salary right now. But I also, you also have this thing where teams don't like to trade within the division. I think sometimes you get afraid that just because a guy didn't work out for you, you send him to somebody else and it works out, and then you have to pay the price because you got to see him 4 times a year, and you look silly. I mean, look, Anthony Duclair is coming in tonight. I mean, the early return on that Ryan Dzingel for Anthony Duclair has easily favored the Ottawa Senators, right? Duclair's got over 20 goals. He was in the All-Star game, and the Senators have a couple of Blue Jackets draft picks they're going to make again this summer because of that trade. So they don't all work out. Sometimes they do. The Seth Jones, Ryan Johansson, that's worked out great. Ryan Dzingel, then that one's not so great. But, sometimes you get a little bit of cold feet about going within the division with guys, and that's both ways. Jersey could do that too. And I'm not sure exactly what they're looking to do. Again, they have an interim GM who I think has made some really good moves there. But that's an interesting one. I don't know. I would have to I guess I'm not going to have to think about it for too long because either something would happen by 3 o'clock today or something would happen over the summer. But interesting, well thought out. Good job by you guys. All right, time for our next question. Let's get to it.
Hey, Bob. This is James King out of Columbus, Ohio. My question is regarding the length of schedule in the NHL. With injuries on the rise due to physicality and speed of today's hockey, do you think it would be a good idea to shorten the NHL season by maybe 6 games? And another question, do you think the NHL would actually consider this change?
Well, James, interesting stuff, interesting concept there. I know that there have been minor leagues that have shortened their season. They've been able to get that done, I think, a little bit more easily than expecting the National Hockey League and its Players Association to shorten it. But here's where it's tough for me, and I think this is where you run into opposition throughout the league. And, again, I've never sat in these governors' meetings and all this stuff. I'm just going from the common sense standpoint, okay? Let's say that you're a team that sells out every night, because there are a lot of those teams that they are going to have a sellout every time they play. And if you're talking about shortening the season by 6 games, so let's just say for argument's sake that means you're going to lose 3 home games and 3 road games. Well, that is losing 3 sellouts. And, teams rely on that money. for their bottom line, for their payroll, the whole 9 yards. So I think you would have a hard time convincing those teams to go along with that. Now, how many teams really is that, right? I guess that's a fair question. How many teams are we really talking about when it comes to that? But there's going to be a group there that's not going to want to give up any home games whatsoever. They're not going to want to shorten it by 3 because that's, 18 to 20,000 people 3 times. Now you're looking at almost 60,000 people, 60,000 tickets, which are not going for $2 a piece, right? So, that to me is where I think there would be a hang-up. I could see where the Players Association might be okay with that, less wear and tear. But again, it's the business model of it. But then again, there's going to be less money in it for the players. And when you look at the collective bargaining agreement, it's a shared partnership with a split. So maybe the players would be in that boat too, and they don't want to take any money out of the till. I don't know. So I don't know if the NHL would go for that or not. I really don't. I understand the question. I don't think it's a terrible question by any means. I think it's legit. I just don't know if you could get enough people together in a coalition to actually make it happen. And then again, if you get it done on, let's just say the league does it, and then you got to go to the Players Association. If they're not on board, then that's another full hiccup that you have to go through before it's all said and done. But a good question. I do appreciate it. Let's move on to the next one.
Hi, Bob. My name's Adam from Delaware, and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the shootout lineup from Saturday night. I know Torts doesn't plan ahead for shootouts, but why do you think he went with people like Nash, Stenlund, and Matteau instead of more skilled players like Foligno and Werenski? So I was just wondering, do you think that this is part of the reason they lost, or do you think they could have won if Elvis made one more save and maybe someone like Werenski or Foligno had scored?
Adam, you were just bringing the heat today, talking about the shootout lineup, but this is a worthwhile question because while it was going on, I was scratching my head a couple of times there too. Stephane Matteau went in the top 3. He's been here for 10 minutes, and he got a chance to get out there and take one of those first coveted shootout spots. I was surprised. I'm not saying it was right or wrong, but I was surprised. But I think as it did go on a little bit longer and further down the line, I was surprised not to see Nick Foligno or Zach Werenski. So those are legitimate points by you. Could they have won the game if Elvis would have stopped one more? Of course. Absolutely. If he would have stopped Ryan Ellis, the game would have been over. But he didn't. And then they didn't score going the other way either. Is it – well, this is where it's tough because, if you're looking back at 1 point, you get to the end of the year and you're looking back at 1 point being a difference, I think it's fair to scratch your head a little bit and say, wonder if you could have had a better outcome in that shootout with some different personnel. But again, it's hindsight. It's 2020. It's second-guessing all that stuff. But it's legitimate. With all of these guys that have just come up from Cleveland, and you've got your captain sitting there, and you've got Zach Werenski, who is having a great offensive year, sitting there, it is a legitimate question to ask how they did not go above some of the other guys that went. And I don't know the answer. I haven't talked to Torts about it. But you are, again, it's a fair question to ask. That's what I'm trying to say. I can't get it out of my mouth. Very fair question to ask and good insight by you. Thank you for the question. All right, one more live question.
Hey there, Bobby Mack. This is Sean from Grove City, Ohio, and I'm recording this tonight as Blue Jackets are finishing up a pretty devastating loss to Philadelphia in Philadelphia. And my question is, what is it going to take for this team to get back on the right side? I know Torts has been saying that he really doesn't care about the losing streak. They're still getting points here and there. But this isn't a new crew. This is the same group of misfits, if you want to call it that, who have been finding a way. And now they're finding a way not to do it. So what do you see? What's going on? What's it going to take? Thanks.
Well, Sean, it's another good question by you. It is kind of the same cast, but let's be honest. When these guys first came here, and we were all amazed, right? We were just amazed at their overachieving. And the fact that it's come back down to earth, I don't think should surprise us. We want it to keep going. We want to keep going sky high. We want them to continue to overachieve, and it just hasn't happened. And it usually doesn't happen like that in life. Eventually you settle back down. But Seth Jones, to me, is the key. When Seth Jones leaves, it disrupts so many things. He plays so many big minutes. He makes so many little plays that are just instrumental in keeping that defensive structure right where it needs to be. If Zach Werenski makes a mistake, Seth Jones cleans it up. We don't even see it anymore because he does it so well. If he makes a mistake himself, he cleans it up so fast that you didn't even realize that he made a mistake. That's how good he is. And that, to me, has been the key, because all of these other guys, maybe they're not overachieving like they were earlier, but when you couple that with not having, I've said this before, I'll say it again, the one guy that you couldn't afford to lose. When you put those two things together, I think that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. I think that's why they can't find a way. I talked to Nick Foligno coming out of the building in Nashville after the game on Saturday, and he was dejected, and rightfully so, because they played a hard game, they played well, and they didn't get the second point. And they knew they could have had the second point. And, I said that to him. I go, well, I know it doesn't mean anything to you right now, but at least you picked up 1 point. And he goes, yeah, I know, but we need two. We need two right now. And I said, Nick, that's true, but I'm going to tell you what I know about you and your teammates. When you finally get a win, you're going to get 6 in a row because that's how you play. And he looked at me and he goes, you're right. We are such a streaky team. And they are. And they can streak in the best of ways and in the worst of ways. And right now they're in the worst of ways. They're a feel-good team to an extent. They need something to make them feel good. They need a win. Hopefully they could get one at home tonight against Ottawa and maybe feel good about themselves. But, again, what's it going to take? It's going to take something. It's going to take a win. It's going to take that positive influx. But the Seth Jones injury is what changes it all. Every single bit of it changes with him out of the lineup, on the ice and off the ice. That's how big of a leader he is. That's how big of a figure he is for this organization and for this team. Without him, it changes everything. I lied. I have one more voice memo question, and here it comes right now.
Hey, Bob, it's Greg in Cleveland. I wanted to start by complimenting you on your broadcast style. I love to listen to you. I think you're very passionate and you're funny and engaging with the fans. And I'll tell you, I really feel like as a sports fan in Ohio, I'm privileged because I feel like the sports presentations that are here are like second to none based on other teams that I've heard. I don't know if you pay attention or if you feel the same way or not, but I really do enjoy listening to you and what the Blue Jackets Radio Network does. My question for you is what you think the best route for replacing Seth Jones is. I don't know if there is a trade that could be made similar to what the Indians did when they brought in Jay Bruce a few years ago, where they were able to bring in a guy that could make an impact and not give up a lot for him. Or if you think that there's an in-house option that would be just as good, and if there was, who that would be. Thanks again, Bob, for everything you do, and go Jackets.
Well, Greg, thank you very much for the kind compliments. I really do appreciate it. And you're right, there are a lot of great people that bring you games of all different sports here in Ohio. And I am very privileged to be amongst that group, and I'm glad that you appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me. And, oh, by the way, may I just say to all of you that it's not necessary that you butter me up with compliments when you send these questions to me. It's nice. It's not necessary, but it's nice. But, Greg, thank you. I mean that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your appreciation. It means a lot to me. Well, you just heard what I said about Seth Jones and how it changes everything with him no longer being in the lineup. So how do you replace that? Well, now you have so many guys injured. At one point we talked about, throughout most of the season, we talked about the defensive depth and can you use that to get some offense. But now the defensive depth it's gone because they're either injured or playing. So you really don't have that same option that you did earlier in the year. And as far as an in-house option, there's just none, Greg. There's not. I mean, Gabriel Carlson has been a healthy scratch. There is no other Seth Jones. He's a one-of-a-kind defenseman. I think he is extremely special. I think he's a special person. I think he's a special player. and you can't replace that kind of player. Do you have to work through it, and do you have to work together enough to get through the time that he's out of the lineup? Of course you do. Absolutely you do. But there is nobody that's going to come in and do exactly what he does. Now, if you go back to an earlier question about a Sonny Milano trade for a defenseman, again, who would have thought we'd talk about should you acquire a defenseman? When coming into the season, we thought there were 9 or 10. But, and maybe that is something. Again, it's got to be the right fit on both sides. But maybe if you can find a guy that has some experience and that you can get for the right price, maybe you try to get that guy and put him in there and help yourself out defensively. But still, I don't care who it is. It's not a replacement for Seth Jones. It would be somebody holding a spot, but nobody replaces that guy. Not in-house and not outside the house. But I do appreciate the question. And again, appreciate the kind words. Now I'm going to go to Twitter for our last question at Bobby Mac Sports, and James from Dallas is checking in, says he's been a Blue Jackets fan since day one and has been hesitant to ask, but he says, I keep waiting for it to happen. Why do you think Trey Fix-Wolansky hasn't been given a shot by now? Keep up the great work, and I appreciate the show. Thank you, James. I appreciate you. Trey Fix-Wolansky is an interesting guy. He is not a big guy. He's another small player. He came out of Edmonton. He was playing junior hockey in the Western Hockey League for the Oil Kings, had a very good junior career there. So far in Cleveland, he's played 36 games. He has 9 goals, 13 assists for 22 points. I know he was injured, and I think that was recently. Here's all I can tell you, James, about who gets called up from Cleveland. The hot hand. And if Trey Fix-Wolansky's having a good season, but he's not necessarily the hot hand at the time, they're in need of somebody, they're going to go with somebody else. Calvin Turcoff, I know, had done well in his last 12 to 15 games. He was really turning it on in Cleveland, so he got the opportunity to come up here and get a look. Stefan Matteau, he started the year with an injury. Once he got himself going, he was playing well. He had a little bit of an advantage. I mean, he's a former first-round pick and had played in the league before, all that stuff. Trey will get his chance, and it may be, heck, it might be today, it might be tomorrow. You never know with this organization with the way things are going right now. But I don't know the specific reason why they haven't looked at him yet, but all I can tell you is, in talking with the management people and talking with the coaches, they called down to the Cleveland Monsters, or they talked to Chris Clark, who's the general manager of the Cleveland Monsters, and they want to know who's playing the best right now. And those guys are getting the first cracks and the first opportunities. So my guess is some guys are just playing a little bit better than him at the moment when the phone rings. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see him. I mean, he's a little spark plug. I know they think very highly of him, and we'll see what happens if maybe he gets a shot before the end of the season. Who knows? With the way things are going right now, there are guys that have gotten a shot that we wouldn't have even thought we would see here this year. And it's exciting and it's frustrating all at the same time, because you want to see your big guys, you want to see your skill back in the lineup and all those things. But it also is kind of fun to take a sneak peek into the future of the organization. And one thing about all of this, whether Jarmo does anything for the trade deadline or whether it goes to the summertime, believe me, I think this is going to make this organization so much better, because they have gotten to see all of these players play in the NHL. Guys can play in the AHL and they can do really well, and you can try to translate that to the National Hockey League. You can speculate, you can go through analytics, all of that stuff. But until you see them play in the NHL, you're not really sure. They have seen so many guys play. I think that is going to be such a valuable thing for Jarmo Kekalainen and his staff. They've seen them play. They have a much better idea where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. They can work on the weaknesses with the guys. And, oh, guess what? 30 other teams have watched them play too. So now, when you're going to make a trade and, somebody's looking for one of your prospects, and it's one thing if they haven't ever seen that prospect play in the National Hockey League, only in the AHL. But now they've seen him in the NHL too. Again, I think that is going to be, I hope that next year, year after that, we're talking about either guys that are now part of the team on an everyday basis that we look back to this year when they got their opportunity, or we look at a guy that is really contributing who was acquired in a trade using one of the guys that came up and took advantage of the opportunity this year. It's going to be fun to watch. So today, this is a podcast, so I keep saying today, but maybe you're listening to this and it's no longer trade deadline day. February the 24th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, NHL Trade Deadline. Jody Shelley and I are going to be at BlueJackets.com and on the Blue Jackets app. We'll wrap it up for you. If the Blue Jackets have anything going on, we'll let you know. If they didn't do anything, we'll still let you know on some other things that went on in the league that might be of interest in the Metropolitan Division, in the Eastern Conference, what have you. 3 o'clock, BlueJackets.com and on the Blue Jackets app. And then don't forget, the Ottawa Senators are at Nationwide Arena at 7 o'clock to take on the Blue Jackets. Thanks for all of your questions today. They are great. They always are great. And I thought you guys really stepped it up today. I enjoyed it. That's the Monday Mailbag edition of CBJ in 30, presented by Tel Ohio Credit Union. I'm Bob McElligott saying so long.